What if the one thing your doctor never warned you about is quietly hijacking your hormones, stealing your energy, wrecking your skin, and making every diet you try feel impossible? And what if the food industry already knows this, specifically about women's bodies? Today we're exposing exactly what they don't want you to know. You're eating healthy, you're exercising, you're doing everything the magazines, the Instagram influencers, and maybe even your doctor told you to do. And yet, you're exhausted by 2 in the afternoon. Your jeans feel tighter, even though the scale hasn't moved. Your skin is breaking out like you're 17 again. Your mood swings are so intense that you don't even recognize yourself sometimes. And no matter how hard you try to eat less sugar, the cravings come back so strong it feels like your body is working against you. If any of that sounds familiar, I need you to know something important right now. This is not your fault. This is not a willpower problem. And this is absolutely not in your head. What's happening inside your body has a very real, very scientific explanation, and it involves sugar in ways that most health professionals have never fully explained to women. Because here's the thing that genuinely shocks most people when they learn it. The research on how sugar affects the human body has been dominated by studies done on men. Male subjects, male physiology, male hormonal profiles, and the dietary guidelines, the warning labels, the public health campaigns. They've been built largely on that male-centered data and handed to women as if our bodies work exactly the same way. They don't. Women's bodies process sugar differently. Women's hormones interact with blood sugar in unique and powerful ways. And the consequences of high sugar consumption for women are distinct, serious, and almost entirely underreported in mainstream health conversations. So today, we are going to change that. By the end of this video, you are going to understand your body, your cravings, your energy, your skin, and your long-term health in a way that nobody, not your GP, not your gynecologist, not the wellness industry, has probably ever laid out for you this clearly. Let's get into it. Before we can talk about what sugar is doing to your body, we need to get crystal clear on what sugar actually is, because most of us are consuming far more of it than we realize, and it's hiding in places that would genuinely surprise you. When most people hear the word sugar, they picture the white granulated stuff in a bowl on the kitchen counter. But sugar is a broad category of carbohydrates, and it shows up in your body and on food labels in dozens of different forms. There are simple sugars, like glucose and fructose, and there are more complex carbohydrates that break down into sugars during digestion. The ones we need to be most concerned about are added sugars, the sugars that food manufacturers put into products during processing and that have no nutritional value beyond calories. Here's what makes this tricky. Sugar hides under more than 61 different names on ingredient lists: dextrose, maltodextrin, evaporated cane juice, high fructose corn syrup, barley malt, fruit juice concentrate, agave nectar, rice syrup. Manufacturers use these names intentionally, rotating them throughout ingredient lists so that sugar doesn't appear as the first ingredient, even when it essentially is. This is not an accident. This is a calculated strategy. And the foods hiding the most sugar are often the ones marketed specifically to health-conscious women. Low-fat yogurt is frequently packed with added sugar to compensate for the flavor lost when fat is removed. Flavored oat milks and almond milks can contain as much sugar as a soft drink. Protein shakes, granola bars, fruit smoothies, bottled salad dressings, whole grain cereals, and even savory sauces are common sugar delivery vehicles disguised as health foods. The average woman in the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia consumes somewhere between 17 and 22 teaspoons of added sugar per day. The World Health Organization recommends no more than 6 teaspoons. That gap between what we're actually eating and what our bodies are designed to handle is where the damage quietly accumulates. Now, when sugar enters your body, it takes one of 2 main metabolic pathways depending on its form: Glucose is used directly by your cells for energy and is managed by the hormone insulin. Fructose, however, particularly the concentrated fructose found in high fructose corn syrup and sweetened beverages, goes straight to the liver for processing. Your liver can handle small amounts of fructose from whole fruit without issue. But when it's overwhelmed by concentrated fructose from ultra-processed foods and drinks, it begins converting that fructose into fat. This is the beginning of a chain reaction that affects nearly every system in a woman's body, and it's why the type of sugar matters just as much as the amount. Now here is where the conversation shifts, and where most health content completely drops the ball. Because once you understand how sugar interacts specifically with female hormones and female physiology, everything changes. Let's start with the menstrual cycle, because this is the foundation of female metabolic health that almost no one discusses in the context of sugar and diet. Your cycle has two main phases. The follicular phase runs from the first day of your period to ovulation, roughly days 1 through 14. During this phase, estrogen is rising, and estrogen actually improves your body's sensitivity to insulin. That means, in the first half of your cycle, your body is relatively efficient at managing blood sugar. You have more metabolic flexibility, your cravings for sugar are generally lower, and your energy tends to be more stable. Then comes the luteal phase, days 15 through 28 after ovulation. Progesterone rises, and progesterone has a counterinsulin effect. Your insulin sensitivity decreases. Your cells become temporarily more resistant to insulin signaling. What that means in practice is that the exact same meal you ate in week 1 of your cycle can produce a significantly larger blood sugar spike in week 3. Your body is working harder to manage glucose. You feel hungrier, carbohydrate cravings intensify, and blood sugar crashes feel more severe and more emotional. Research from the University of Virginia has shown that women actually experience more severe symptoms of hypoglycemia, that's low blood sugars at equivalent glucose levels compared to men. So that shaky, anxious, foggy, I need to eat right now, feeling that many women describe, it's not drama. It is a measurable, documented biological reality. This is also why PMS feels so much worse when your diet is high in sugar. When blood sugar is spiking and crashing repeatedly throughout the day during your luteal phase, it amplifies every PMS symptom you already experience. Bloating worsens because sugar promotes water retention and gut inflammation. Cramping intensifies because sugar increases the production of pro-inflammatory molecules called prostaglandins, the same compounds that cause uterine contractions. Mood swings deepen because the blood sugar roller coaster directly disrupts serotonin and dopamine levels. And fatigue becomes crushing because your body is constantly playing catch-up with an overwhelmed metabolic system. There is a widely repeated idea that chocolate cravings before your period are purely emotional. They are not. In the luteal phase, your body's magnesium levels drop. Magnesium plays a critical role in blood sugar regulation, and the combination of magnesium depletion and insulin resistance creates a genuine physiological craving for quick energy. Your body is asking for magnesium and fast glucose. The problem is that most of what we reach for, chocolate bars, biscuits, sweets, delivers the glucose spike without the magnesium, making the underlying imbalance worse. Now let's talk about what happens as women move into perimenopause and menopause, because this is where sugar's impact on women becomes critically serious and almost entirely absent from public health messaging. As estrogen declines during perimenopause, the insulin-sensitizing protection that estrogen provided begins to disappear. Women who had no particular issue managing their blood sugar in their 20s and 30s often find that in their 40s and 50s, the same diet produces weight gain, energy crashes, and metabolic symptoms they've never experienced before. This isn't a failure of discipline. It's a fundamental shift in hormonal architecture, and sugar is the accelerant. The visceral belly fat that so many women notice accumulating in midlife, even when their overall weight hasn't changed dramatically, is directly linked to this shift in insulin sensitivity. Visceral fat, the fat stored around the internal organs, is metabolically active. It produces inflammatory compounds, further disrupts insulin signaling, and creates a self-reinforcing cycle of metabolic dysfunction. And high sugar intake is one of the most powerful drivers of visceral fat accumulation. There is also a documented, though underreported, connection between blood sugar spikes and hot flash frequency. Observational data suggests that women with higher sugar intake in perimenopause experience more frequent and more intense hot flashes. The mechanism involves the way rapid blood sugar changes affect the hypothalamus, the part of the brain that regulates body temperature. Every time blood sugar crashes sharply, the hypothalamus can misread the signal and trigger a thermoregulatory response. After menopause, women's cardiovascular risk rises sharply to approach that of men. And this is largely because the protective effects of estrogen on blood vessels and metabolic function are gone. High sugar intake in postmenopausal women significantly accelerates this risk, contributing to elevated triglycerides, reduced HDL cholesterol, increased systemic inflammation, and arterial stiffness. Heart disease is the #1 cause of death for women in the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia. And diet, particularly sugar intake, is one of the most modifiable risk factors. Here's something that doesn't get nearly enough attention. The relationship between what you eat and how you feel mentally is far more direct and biological than most people, Weiss, and many mental health professionals acknowledge. When you consume sugar, your blood glucose rises rapidly. Your pancreas releases insulin to bring it back down. But when large amounts of sugar are consumed, especially refined sugars without fiber or protein to slow absorption, insulin overreacts and blood glucose drops below baseline. That drop is what produces the familiar crash: sudden fatigue, irritability, difficulty concentrating, anxiety, and a desperate urge to eat something sweet again to bring your energy back up. This cycle, repeated multiple times a day, creates a biochemical environment that closely mimics an anxiety disorder. Heart palpitations, shakiness, brain fog, emotional volatility. These are blood sugar symptoms as much as they are anxiety symptoms. And for many women, they are both simultaneously, each one making the other worse. A large study published by researchers at University College London found a significant association between high dietary sugar intake and increased risk of depression. Women in the study who consumed the most added sugar showed meaningfully higher rates of mood disorders. This is consistent with growing research showing that sugar promotes neuroinflammation, inflammation in the brain, which disrupts the production and signaling of serotonin and dopamine, our primary mood-regulating neurotransmitters. And then there is the addiction question, the one the food industry spends enormous resources avoiding. Sugar activates the brain's dopamine reward system in patterns that research has compared to other addictive substances. For women, this is particularly relevant because women's brains show different dopamine sensitivity depending on hormonal state. During the luteal phase, when estrogen and progesterone are shifting, the reward system becomes more reactive. Sugar feels more rewarding. The pull toward it intensifies. And the guilt cycle that follows, eating sugar, feeling good briefly, crashing, feeling bad, eating more, is not a moral failure. It is a neurochemical feedback loop that has been designed into processed food products with extraordinary precision. Cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, also plays a direct role in women's sugar consumption. When you are under chronic stress, which the majority of women managing work, family, relationships, and relentless social expectations absolutely are, cortisol levels stay persistently elevated. Cortisol raises blood sugar as part of the fight-or-flight response, preparing your body for immediate physical action. But when that physical action never comes because the stress is emotional and ongoing, that elevated blood sugar still needs to be managed with insulin. And when insulin clears the glucose, your blood sugar drops. And cortisol triggers cravings for high-energy foods, specifically sugars and fats, to bring it back up. This is the physiological mechanism behind stress eating. It is your body responding exactly as it was designed to in a modern environment it was never designed for. Now let's talk about something that speaks to every woman's daily reality. What sugar is doing to your skin and your hair, because this is where the internal damage becomes visible in ways you can see every single day. There is a process in your body called glycation. When excess sugar circulates in your bloodstream, sugar molecules attach to proteins, including collagen and elastin, the two structural proteins that keep your skin firm, smooth, and youthful. When sugar binds to these proteins, it creates what scientists call advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. These AGEs stiffen and degrade collagen fibers, reducing skin elasticity, deepening wrinkles, creating a dull and uneven complexion, and accelerating every visible sign of aging. And here is the part that matters specifically for women. Collagen production naturally declines with age, and this decline accelerates significantly after menopause. High sugar intake speeds this process up dramatically. Every blood sugar spike is quite literally aging your skin faster. Adult acne, the kind that appears on the jaw, chin, and cheeks in women in their 30s, 40s, and beyond, is very frequently diet-related, even when it's being treated with topical products and antibiotics that don't address the root cause. High glycemic foods trigger a hormonal cascade that increases insulin-like growth factor, IGF-1, and androgens, which stimulate the skin's oil glands and promote the kind of inflammation and clogged pores that produce persistent adult breakouts. Dermatologists and functional medicine doctors are increasingly recognizing diet, particularly sugar intake, as a primary factor in adult female acne. If you have been battling acne for years without resolution and no one has talked to you about blood sugar, that is a conversation worth having. Hair health is another visible marker of metabolic function that most women never connect to sugar. Insulin resistance disrupts the hormonal balance between androgens and estrogens, which can accelerate female pattern hair thinning, a condition more common and more emotionally distressing than it is openly discussed. Beyond the hormonal mechanism, high-sugar diets deplete the very nutrients most critical for hair growth. Zinc, biotin, iron, and B vitamins are all diverted or depleted in the process of managing chronic blood sugar dysregulation. If your hair has been thinning and your energy has been low and your skin hasn't been right and you've been putting it all down to stress, it may all be connected by one common thread running through your metabolic health. Let's talk about the long game now, because the consequences of chronically high sugar intake for women extend far beyond energy and aesthetics into serious, life-altering health conditions. Polycystic ovary syndrome, or PCOS, affects approximately 1 in 10 women of reproductive age and is one of the most common hormonal disorders in the world. At its core, PCOS is fundamentally a condition of insulin resistance. Women with PCOS are 4 times more likely to develop type 2 diabetes. Their ovaries are directly affected by elevated insulin levels, which disrupts ovulation, drives excess androgen production, and creates the hormonal chaos that produces irregular periods, acne, hair thinning, and fertility challenges. Sugar is not the only factor in PCOS, but it is one of the most powerful and most modifiable dietary drivers of the insulin dysregulation that underlies it. And yet, how many women with PCOS are told in their diagnosis appointment that significantly reducing their sugar intake could meaningfully change their symptoms? Not nearly enough. Type 2 diabetes in women is also diagnosed later, managed less aggressively, and produces worse cardiovascular outcomes than in men, in part because the research and clinical frameworks were built around male patients. Gestational diabetes, which affects between 2 and 10% of pregnancies, depending on the population, is not just a temporary condition of pregnancy. It is a significant predictor of type 2 diabetes developing within 10 years after delivery. a fact that is frequently not communicated to women after their pregnancy ends. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is rising in women at alarming rates, driven substantially by fructose consumption from sweetened beverages and ultra-processed foods. It produces no symptoms in its early stages, is rarely screened for in women who don't fit the typical risk profile, and can progress silently to serious liver damage over years and decades. And perhaps the most sobering emerging research involves the brain. Chronic blood sugar dysregulation and insulin resistance in the brain are increasingly being studied in connection with Alzheimer's disease, a condition so metabolically linked to diabetes that some researchers have proposed calling it type 3 diabetes. Women account for approximately 2/3 of Alzheimer's cases globally. The reasons are multiple and complex, but metabolic health, specifically the decades of insulin resistance and neuroinflammation that high-sugar diets promote, is an area of active and urgent investigation. Protecting your brain long-term starts with protecting your metabolic health now, and that begins with understanding sugar's specific role in your female physiology. None of this information is meant to frighten you into never enjoying food again. That is not the goal, and frankly, restriction and fear are not sustainable or healthy approaches to eating for women, particularly given how powerfully stress itself drives metabolic dysfunction. The goal is to give you information that empowers you to make choices that actually align with how your body works. The single most effective strategy for most women is not elimination. It is pairing. When you consume sugar or carbohydrates alongside fiber, protein, or healthy fat, you dramatically slow the rate at which glucose enters your bloodstream. The blood sugar spike is blunted. The insulin response is more measured. The crash is gentler. This means a piece of fruit eaten with a handful of almonds is a fundamentally different metabolic experience than that same fruit eaten alone. A bowl of oats with eggs and avocado on the side is entirely different from oats with juice. You don't have to remove foods. You have to reconsider what surrounds them. Timing also matters more than most nutrition conversations acknowledge. Your insulin sensitivity is naturally higher in the morning, meaning your body handles carbohydrates and sugars more efficiently earlier in the day. Moving higher carbohydrate foods to breakfast and lunch and keeping evenings more protein and fat-focused aligns your eating patterns with your body's natural metabolic rhythm. Cycle syncing your nutrition is a strategy more women are discovering, and it is firmly grounded in the hormonal biology we discussed earlier. In your follicular phase, roughly the first 2 weeks of your cycle, your insulin sensitivity is at its best. You have more metabolic flexibility and your body manages sugar more efficiently. In your luteal phase, the 2 weeks before your period, prioritize protein and healthy fats at every meal to stabilize blood sugar, reduce insulin resistance, and biochemically counteract the cravings that are going to intensify. In the week before your period specifically, increasing magnesium-rich foods, dark leafy greens, pumpkin seeds, dark chocolate above 80%, black beans, addresses the magnesium depletion that drives chocolate and sugar cravings from the inside out. Beyond diet, 2 lifestyle factors have the most powerful documented effect on blood sugar regulation: sleep and movement. Research consistently shows that even one night of poor sleep reduces insulin sensitivity the following day to a degree comparable to eating a high-fat diet for weeks. Getting 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep is not a luxury, it is a metabolic necessity, and movement does not mean hours in the gym. Multiple randomized controlled trials have shown that a 10-minute walk after a meal reduces post-meal blood sugar spikes significantly by directing glucose into working muscles. If you do nothing else from this video, consider a short walk after your largest meal of the day. Strength training deserves special mention. Building muscle mass is one of the most powerful long-term investments you can make in your insulin sensitivity, because muscle tissue is the body's primary site of glucose uptake. The more muscle you have, the more efficiently your body clears sugar from the bloodstream. This is particularly important for women moving into perimenopause and beyond, when metabolic rate naturally shifts. If you are experiencing unexplained fatigue, persistent weight gain around the abdomen, intense sugar cravings, mood instability, irregular periods, adult acne, or hair thinning, please advocate for metabolic screening at your next medical appointment. Ask specifically for a fasting blood glucose test and an HbA1c, which gives a 3-month average of your blood sugar levels. These are simple, inexpensive blood tests that can reveal insulin resistance long before it develops into type 2 diabetes. Many women are in a state of prediabetes or significant insulin resistance for years before anyone catches it. You deserve to know what is happening in your body. Before we close, let's rapidly clear up 5 persistent myths about sugar and women's health that are causing real harm. The first myth is that natural sugar is always fine in any amount. Whole fruit is genuinely healthy. It comes packaged with fiber, vitamins, and antioxidants that slow sugar absorption and provide real nutritional value. But fruit juice, dried fruit, and especially concentrated forms of natural sugars like agave and honey are metabolically far closer to added sugar than to whole fruit, and quantity still matters enormously, particularly for women with insulin resistance or PCOS. The second myth is that diet or zero sugar products are a safe alternative. Artificial sweeteners and sugar alcohols are increasingly being studied for their effects on the gut microbiome, on insulin signaling, and on the brain's reward relationship with sweet taste. The research is not settled, but the evidence is sufficient to suggest that regularly consuming large amounts of ultra-sweet zero-calorie products is not a neutral act on your metabolism. The third myth, and this is perhaps the most damaging, is that sugar cravings mean you lack willpower or self-control. You now understand the hormonal, neurochemical, and stress-driven mechanisms that drive sugar cravings in women. Willpower is not the variable. Biology is the variable. Treating yourself with compassion and addressing the underlying drivers is far more effective than white-knuckling your way through cravings that have a physiological cause. The fourth myth is that if you are not overweight, sugar is not affecting you. Metabolic dysfunction, a condition researchers sometimes describe with the acronym TOFI, meaning thin outside, fat inside, is entirely possible in people who appear slim. Visceral fat around the organs, elevated triglycerides, insulin resistance, and liver fat can all develop in women who are not conventionally overweight. Your external appearance is not a reliable indicator of your metabolic health. The fifth myth is that reducing sugar means never enjoying food socially or never having dessert again. Sustainable metabolic health is not built on deprivation. It is built on a foundation of consistent daily choices that keep your blood sugar stable, support your hormones, and leave room for genuine enjoyment without guilt, without binging, and without the cycle of restriction and overconsumption that actually makes sugar's hold on you stronger over time. Your body is not working against you. Your cravings are not character flaws. Your symptoms, the fatigue, the weight, the skin, the mood, the cycles that feel unmanageable, are communications from a system that has been underserved by research, underinformed by medicine, and actively misled by an industry with a financial interest in keeping you hooked. Understanding how sugar interacts with your specific female biology is one of the most empowering pieces of health knowledge you can carry with you. You now know that your hormonal cycle changes how you process glucose. You know that perimenopause and menopause shift your metabolic landscape. You know that your brain, your skin, your hair, your mood, and your long-term disease risk are all connected to how you manage blood sugar over a lifetime. This is not about perfection. It is about information, real information, finally being in your hands. Share this with a woman in your life who deserves to understand her body this clearly, because the truth about sugar and women's health has been kept quiet for long enough.